The Samuel family had always been a name spoken with admiration across New York's elite circles. Their business empire, Samuel Global, had lasted 4 generations, built on shipping, real estate, and textiles. Rita Samuel, the only daughter, grew up in a world of legacy and expectation. Her father, Edward Samuel, was a stern yet loving patriarch who had taught her discipline, the value of education, and the burden of carrying the family's name. Her mother, Eleanor, was grace embodied, elegant, charitable, and adored by high society. Rita had been groomed from birth to take on responsibility, not just as an heiress, but as a future leader who would expand her family's reach into new industries. Every gala, every charity luncheon, every boardroom dinner was a reminder that her life was tied to the empire. Yet, behind the polished facade, Rita was not spoiled. She was hungry for purpose, eager to prove she was more than an heiress, and quietly searching for someone who would love her for who she was, not for the Samuel fortune. That someone seemed to appear when David Timothy entered her life. David wasn't from money. His background was middle class, his parents school teachers who had sacrificed to give him a good education. He had studied business administration with top grades, and though his name lacked pedigree, his charm, intelligence, and ambition made him stand out. Rita met him at a corporate networking gala where, unlike the others who fawned over her surname, David had spoken to her about world economics and future markets as if she were an equal, not an heiress. His voice carried confidence, his eyes carried fire, and Rita found herself intrigued by his authenticity. Where others sought to impress, David seemed to challenge her, and that was a spark she didn't know she craved. Their conversations flowed with ease, books they had read, places they wished to travel, dreams of businesses they wanted to build. David wanted to rise to greatness. Rita wanted to be free from her golden cage. Together, they imagined a world where their ambitions aligned. But as much as Rita fell for him, others observed with suspicion. Edward Samuel watched David carefully. Though he respected the young man's drive, he worried that ambition without roots could turn to greed. Eleanor, kinder by nature, wanted to believe her daughter's happiness mattered more than pedigree. And then there was Florence Johnson, Rita's so-called best friend since boarding school. Florence came from an average family, always living in Rita's shadow, always overlooked by the men in their circles. Florence had mastered the art of flattery to stay close to Rita, but inside her heart burned with envy. When she saw David and Rita together, her envy deepened into obsession. She would not let Rita, who already had wealth and beauty, claim David as well. From that moment, Florence silently marked David as hers, no matter what it took. Love blossomed quickly between Rita and David. Their courtship was the kind that made newspapers and gossip columns buzz. David escorted Rita to charity auctions, university lectures, and weekends away from the city where, for the first time, Rita felt free from the weight of her surname. David's background, though humble compared to hers, seemed to give him a perspective that she admired. He wasn't intimidated by the power of her family. Instead, he saw it as a challenge to rise alongside her. Their romance was painted as a modern-day fairy tale. The ambitious young man who captured the heart of the heiress. Rita's mother, Eleanor, often smiled when she saw them together, hoping that maybe this was a kind of love that could carry her daughter through the trials of inheritance and legacy. Florence, however, simmered in the background. She played her role as a doting friend, smiling, laughing, and even helping Rita plan her engagement parties. But in her heart, resentment festered. She began shadowing David more closely, learning about his insecurities, his frustrations with constantly being measured against the Samuels' wealth. David, though charmed by Rita's love, could not ignore the subtle pressure of being the lesser man. Every time he walked into a boardroom with her father, he felt like a schoolboy waiting for permission. Florence noticed this and quietly began planting seeds of doubt in David's mind. She whispered that Rita would never truly see him as equal, that the Samuels would eventually control him as they controlled their empire. "You think they'll let you lead?" Florence murmured once when David confided in her frustrations. "Rita loves you, yes, but her family will never allow you to be more than her shadow." Those words stuck like poison. Still, Rita remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrents around her. She was caught up in her wedding preparations, imagining a life with David that would bridge both their worlds. She saw Florence as her maid of honor, never suspecting that her closest friend was already weaving a net of betrayal. To Rita, David was her equal, her partner, her future. To David, Rita was love, but also a constant reminder of his inadequacies. And to Florence, They were both obstacles standing in the way of her own twisted ambition. The stage was being set for a storm that none of them could yet see coming. The honeymoon phase didn't last long. As Rita and David settled into married life, the subtle cracks began to show. Rita's family, especially her father, continued to treat David with cautious politeness but withheld real trust. David wanted influence in Samuel Global, but Edward saw him as unproven. When board members dismissed David's suggestions, he felt humiliated. Rita tried to reassure him, telling him that success was a matter of time and patience, but David's pride was wounded. Florence seized every opportunity to make those wounds deeper. She would show up at social events uninvited, offering sympathetic words to David, listening when Rita was too busy with family obligations. Slowly, Florence became his confidant, twisting her words just enough to fan his bitterness. Meanwhile, Rita remained deeply in love, blind to the subtle shifts. She dreamed of expanding her family, of becoming a mother, of building a new legacy with David. Her mother often told her to focus on nurturing her marriage and not just the empire. Yet even as Rita dreamed, Florence was making herself indispensable to David. She flattered him when he felt small, encouraged his ambitions when they clashed with the Samuels, and painted Rita as someone who would never truly understand the struggle of being an outsider. She was born into gold, Florence whispered one evening when David vented his frustrations. But you're the one who built yourself. You deserve more than just being in her shadow. As David began to drift further from Rita emotionally, Florence moved closer, waiting like a serpent for the perfect strike. Rita, juggling her father's increasing health issues and her responsibilities, didn't see the growing intimacy between her husband and her best friend. She thought Florence was being helpful, easing David's loneliness while she balanced her family's demands. In truth, Florence was feeding David's ego and resentment, slowly preparing him for the ultimate betrayal. The Samuel Empire had weathered decades of storms, but the storm that swept through now was unlike any other. Subtle at first, it began with supply chain delays and inexplicable losses in overseas investments. Contracts that had been reliable for years suddenly collapsed. Competitors gained access to trade secrets. Rita's father, Edward Samuel, would pride himself on sharp instincts, felt his control slipping. What he didn't know was that Florence and David had carefully orchestrated much of the chaos. Florence, leveraging her network of less than ethical brokers, arranged forged documents and deals that siphoned funds from Samuel Global. David, in his resentment, found himself complicit. Though he didn't set out to destroy the empire, his desire to prove himself, and his bitterness at Edward's constant rejection, made him look the other way when Florence suggested moves that undermined Samuel Global. Rita watched the decline with horror. She sat in board meetings where panicked directors raised their voices, demanding answers, while journalists began to speculate about corruption. Her father's health declined under pressure. His once commanding voice reduced to strained coughs and bitter sighs. Rita tried to shoulder more responsibility, working day and night, but every effort was sabotaged. Competitors who were supposed to be allies pulled out of deals. Investors grew cold. She suspected betrayal, but Florence's face, calm, supportive, and sympathetic, disarmed her. David, instead of offering strength, lashed out. He accused her of incompetence, of letting her family drag him down. Rita's heart broke at his words, but she clung to the belief that he was simply stressed that together they would survive. But survival never came. The empire collapsed spectacularly. Newspapers published headlines calling the fall of a dynasty. Rival companies circled like vultures, swallowing Samuel Global's assets. Rita's father collapsed one evening at the dinner table, never to rise again. The doctors called it a heart attack, but Rita knew it was grief that killed him. Standing at her father's grave, tears streaming down her face, she felt the weight of legacy and loss crush her. Beside her, David offered no comfort. He stood cold, distant, already consumed by the mistress waiting in the shadows. Florence, who had worn black to the funeral, hid her smile beneath a veil. For Rita, the world she had known ended that day, though she didn't yet realize it was only the beginning of her greatest trial. After her father's death, Rita clung desperately to her marriage, believing that if she lost David too, she would have nothing left. The mansion felt emptier, the halls echoing with silence as creditors claimed properties and luxury cars were sold off. Her mother, Eleanor, weakened by grief, withdrew from society, leaving Rita to carry the burdens alone. She tried to confide in David, to rebuild their life together, but he responded with bitterness. He accused her of being naive, of failing to protect him from the shame of being attached to a fallen dynasty. His words cut like blades, every argument driving a wedge deeper between them. Florence, meanwhile, took advantage of Rita's fragility. She became David's shoulder to lean on, whispering venom under the guise of comfort. She painted Rita as a liability, telling David that he was too brilliant to be dragged down by her. At social gatherings, Florence began arriving at David's side rather than Rita's, though still pretending friendship. The whispers grew louder. People noticed a closeness between Florence and David, and Rita became the object of cruel gossip. The poor little heiress clinging to a man who's already moved on, society whispered behind fans and champagne glasses. Rita felt the humiliation in every glance, every forced smile. Despite the betrayal becoming increasingly obvious, Rita fought to keep her dignity. She begged David to remember the love they once had, reminding him of their dreams, their shared moments. But David's eyes had changed. Where once they held admiration, now they carried impatience, even contempt. Florence's poison had done its work well. Rita realized with horror that the man she had married was slipping away, not to business or ambition, but into the arms of her closest friend. Trust, once the bedrock of her love, was now shattered, and the pieces cut her every time she tried to hold on. The mask dropped sooner than Rita expected. Florence no longer played the role of loyal friend. She flaunted her presence in David's life. She began appearing at their home under the pretense of discussing business. Soon, her perfume lingered in rooms Rita had once filled. One evening, Rita returned from visiting her grieving mother to find Florence seated at her dining table, sipping wine with David as though she belonged there. The laughter that echoed from their lips was like a dagger piercing Rita's heart. David, emboldened by Florence's constant praise, stopped pretending. He openly dismissed Rita in conversations, belittling her decisions and mocking her efforts to salvage what little remained of her family's reputation. Florence would smirk at his side, her hand brushing his, her eyes gleaming with triumph. Rita confronted them once, her voice trembling with both anger and sorrow. But David silenced her with words that would haunt her forever. Florence understands me in ways you never could. You were born into privilege. Rita, I had to claw for everything, and you'll never understand that. Maybe I married the wrong Samuel. Humiliation became her new normal. At galas, Florence clung to David's arm, introducing herself as his partner while Rita stood alone, abandoned in plain sight. The whispers of society grew harsher. Once envied, Rita became a symbol of pity. Some tried to console her, but most relished the drama. Florence had achieved what she always desired. She had stolen not just Rita's husband, but her pride. Rita's heart broke anew every day, but beneath the pain, something began to stir, an ember of quiet defiance. The breaking point came on a stormy night. Rita had prepared dinner, hoping to rekindle even a spark of their former love. But when David arrived, Florence was with him, laughing as though they owned the place. Rita begged Florence to leave, but David shocked her by siding with his mistress. "This is my house too, Rita," he said coldly. "If you can't live with reality, then you should go." Rita's breath caught in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her own husband was driving her out, choosing her best friend over her. The argument escalated. Rita's tears flowed as she pleaded for her marriage, for their vows, for the life they had built. But David's face was stone, his words final. He physically handed her a suitcase, packed by Florence herself, filled with only the bare minimum of her belongings. "Leave, Rita," he spat, "and don't come back. You're nothing but a burden." Florence stood smugly behind him, arms crossed, savoring every second of Rita's humiliation. That night, Rita walked out her mansion in the pouring rain, carrying nothing but pain and betrayal. Her once secure world had collapsed entirely. She had no home, no empire, no husband, no father, and worst of all, no dignity left. In the shadows of the city, she vowed never to forget this night. She would rise again, but the woman David and Florence had destroyed would not be the same one who returned. Rita wandered through the streets of New York, with nowhere to go. Her friends, once eager to bask in her wealth, turned away when she knocked on their doors. The scandal of her downfall had made her toxic. Tabloids painted her as a tragic heiress who had lost everything, and no one wanted to be associated with her. Her mother, too frail and unwell, could not offer shelter. Rita found herself sleeping in a rundown motel, her only comfort the memories of what once had been. Days turned into weeks. She pawned her jewelry to buy food, took odd jobs where she could, and struggled to survive. The woman who once commanded respect in boardrooms was now cleaning offices at night and folding clothes at laundromats. Each shift was a reminder of her fall, but also a quiet sharpening of her resolve. If Florence and David thought she was destroyed, they were wrong. She still breathed, and as long as she lived, she would not give them the satisfaction of her defeat. Yet the loneliness was unbearable. Rita often cried herself to sleep, clutching the one photo she had saved of her father. But one morning, her despair shifted when she missed her cycle and bought a pregnancy test. When the two lines appeared, her knees gave way beneath her. She was carrying David's child. Panic overwhelmed her. How could she raise a baby in this state? But as she pressed her hand to her stomach, a flicker of hope bloomed. She wasn't alone anymore. The pregnancy gave Rita a new reason to live. Though terrified, she resolved to protect the life growing inside her. She hid her condition at first, afraid that David or Florence might find out and use it against her. She worked tirelessly, often collapsing from exhaustion. But every movement in her womb reminded her of why she couldn't give up. She whispered promises to her unborn child at night, vowing they would never suffer as she had. Support came unexpectedly from Lucia, a childhood friend who had distanced herself during the scandal. When Lucia saw Rita in a grocery store, pale and thin, she was shocked. Learning of her pregnancy, she insisted Rita move into her small apartment. For the first time in months, Rita felt the warmth of friendship. Lucia helped her with doctor visits, cooked her meals, and encouraged her when the nights grew heavy with fear. As Rita's belly grew, so did her determination. She decided she would not just survive, she would rebuild. David and Florence had stolen her empire, but she still had her mind, her resilience, and her unborn child. One evening, staring at the skyline of the city, she whispered, "You tried to bury me, David, but you forgot I am a seed." Labor came on a cold winter night. Rita screamed in pain as Lucia rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, she held not one, but two tiny miracles, a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. Tears streamed down her face as she kissed their foreheads. In their eyes, she saw not David's betrayal, but a chance for redemption. They became her anchor, her reason to fight, her living proof that even in the darkest betrayal, life could bloom. Raising twins as a single mother was brutal. Rita juggled sleepless nights with odd jobs, learning to stretch every dollar. She carried her babies on buses, rocked them in laundromats, and read business articles at dawn while they slept. Her body ached, but her spirit sharpened. Every tear, every struggle became fuel for her resolve. She would rise again, not just for herself, but for them. Fate soon intervened when she met Harry Clarkson, a powerful businessman with a reputation for rebuilding fallen companies. Harry saw her working late at a diner and, intrigued by her sharp mind, struck up a conversation. He recognized the brilliance beneath her tired eyes. When he learned who she truly was, he didn't dismiss her as a scandal-ridden heiress. He offered mentorship. With Harry's guidance and her twins as her motivation, Rita's journey of survival and revenge truly began. Harry Clarkson was unlike any man Rita had met. A self-made billionaire, he had built his fortune after clawing his way from poverty, and the fire in his eyes reminded Rita of what David used to be before Florence poisoned his ambition. Harry first noticed Rita one late night, when she was balancing her twins on her lap, while working on a stack of borrowed business textbooks in the corner of the diner where she worked. He admired not just her beauty, but her grit. When he approached her table, Rita braced herself for pity or judgment. But instead, Harry offered a challenge. "You've got the look of someone with an empire in their blood. Why are you wasting that in a diner?" Rita, embarrassed but intrigued, admitted her past. Harry didn't flinch. Instead, he offered her a chance, an internship at his firm, no strings attached. At first, Rita hesitated. She feared being dependent on another powerful man after what David had done to her. But Harry's mentorship proved different. He wasn't trying to control her. He was equipping her. He provided access to resources, taught her how to analyze markets, and encouraged her to think strategically. Rita flourished, surprising herself with how much she remembered from her father's lessons. Slowly, her confidence began to return. She attended small business meetings again, not as a timid outcast, but as a sharp woman who spoke with authority. Word spread in hushed tones. The disgraced Samuel heiress was making a comeback. Harry also grew close to her twins, Daniel and Claire. He would hold them when Rita studied late, read them bedtime stories, and laugh when they tugged on his tie. In time, the twins adored him, calling him Uncle Harry. Rita's heart softened at his kindness, but she guarded it carefully. She wasn't ready to open herself to love again, not when her wounds from David still bled beneath the surface. Still, with Harry's steady presence, Rita began to rebuild, not just her finances, but her belief that she could once again stand tall. Rita knew she could not return to society as herself. Not yet. Florence and David had tarnished her name beyond repair. So, under Harry's guidance, she adopted a new identity in business. Using her middle name, she registered as Eleanor Rivers, presented herself as an independent entrepreneur with no ties to the Samuel family. Her sharp insights quickly gained her attention in business circles. She revived failing companies with bold strategies, and soon whispers spread of a mysterious woman turning small firms into rising stars. Behind closed doors, Rita worked tirelessly. Every evening, after putting the twins to bed, she would pore over market reports and financial data. Harry taught her the art of mergers, the skill of reading people in negotiations, and the ruthless patience of timing. She absorbed it all, transforming from a woman once broken into a formidable strategist. The more success she gained, the more determined she became to uncover the truth of her family's fall. She suspected Florence and David had orchestrated it, but now she had the means to prove it. Meanwhile, David and Florence basked in their ill-gotten empire. They flaunted wealth at galas, boasting about their dominance in industries once owned by the Samuels. But cracks had already begun to form. Florence grew more demanding, eager for recognition as the queen of society. David, though wealthy, was haunted by whispers that he had only succeeded through scandal. And though Rita stayed hidden, she watched in the shadows, biding her time. Rita's chance came when she reconnected with Victor Hayes, a former accountant of Samuel Global who had resigned just before its collapse. Victor, guilt-ridden, confessed that he had been coerced into signing forged documents that transferred massive assets to shell companies linked to Florence. His evidence included bank records, emails, and recorded conversations implicating both Florence and David. When Rita heard the recordings, Florence laughing about how the old man would never survive the stress, her blood ran cold. They hadn't just stolen her family's empire, they had killed her father. Fueled by grief and rage, Rita vowed justice, but Harry counseled patience. Revenge isn't about screaming in their faces, he told her. It's about taking everything they value, quietly, strategically, until they're the ones screaming. Rita understood. She couldn't expose them too soon. She needed to dismantle their power first, brick by brick, and with Victor's documents in hand, she finally had the tools. In the following months, Rita began targeting companies linked to David and Florence. Disguised as Eleanor Rivers, she outbid them on contracts, lured away their top clients, and seeded doubt among their partners. Slowly, the empire they had built on lies began to crumble, though they couldn't yet see who was pulling the strings. Rita moved like a ghost in the market, unseen but devastating. Florence noticed first. Their profits dwindled, their clients defected, and whispers of betrayal circulated in their inner circle. She accused David of incompetence, while David accused her of recklessness. Their partnership, once built on lust and greed, began to fracture. Rita smiled bitterly from afar. The two who had once driven her into the rain now tore at each other's throats like rabid dogs. To society, David and Florence pretended all was well, but behind closed doors, fights erupted daily. Florence's temper grew violent, her paranoia unchecked. She began hiring private investigators to uncover who was targeting them. Yet Rita remained elusive, hidden behind her new identity. Harry ensured her tracks were covered, and even when Florence's men sniffed close, they found nothing but dead ends. Meanwhile, Rita's twins thrived. Watching them laugh reminded her of why she fought so hard. Every time she kissed their forehead, she promised, "You'll never suffer like I did." Her war wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about creating a future where they could stand proud, not as children of betrayal, but as heirs of resilience. David and Florence's relationship hit its breaking point. At a high-profile charity gala, Florence publicly embarrassed David, accusing him of incompetence when one of their biggest deals collapsed overnight. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the once powerful couple aired their dirty laundry on the dance floor. The tabloids devoured the scandal, painting Florence as unstable and David as weak. For Rita, it was another victory. Behind the scenes, she struck harder, using Victor's evidence. She leaked anonymous tips to journalists about financial irregularities in Florence's accounts. Investigations began, and Florence found herself scrambling to hide the trail. David, furious, accused her of dragging him into ruin. Their once united front was now shattered, each plotting against the other. Rita had achieved what she wanted, division. Still, a part of her heart trembled. David had betrayed her cruelly. But late at night, Rita sometimes remembered the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once spoken to her about dreams, not greed. Hatred burned in her veins, yet sorrow lingered. Revenge was satisfying, but it couldn't erase the ache of betrayal. The moment came when Rita decided to step out of the shadows. Dressed elegantly, her twins at her side, she walked into a charity ball hosted by David and Florence. The room fell silent. The woman they had driven into the rain 5 years ago now stood radiant, confident, and powerful. The twins, dark hair and wide-eyed, clung to her hands, the undeniable image of David's children. Whispers erupted across the hall. "She's back. With children." Florence's face went pale, then red with rage. David froze, his wine glass shattering in his hand as he realized the truth. "Mine," he choked. Rita's smile was cold. "Yes, David, yours. The legacy you try to destroy lives on through them." Gasps echoed. Cameras flashed. The humiliation was complete. Rita had not only returned, but had brought with her the proof of his betrayal and her survival. Florence stormed forward, screaming accusations, but Rita silenced her with a single folder, Victor's evidence. "I know what you did, and soon the world will too." Florence faltered, fear flashing in her eyes. For the first time, Rita saw them crumble, not as giants, but as fragile liars exposed. The fallout was immediate. Rita released Victor's evidence to the press. Headlines exploded. Scandal at Timothy Holdings. Fraud and betrayal uncovered. Florence was painted as a mastermind, but David was implicated as complicit. Their empire collapsed within weeks, investors fleeing, authorities circling. Florence tried to blame David entirely, but the evidence tied her too closely. Society, once cruel to Rita, now celebrated her as a phoenix who had risen from ashes. She was invited to speak on resilience, her poise admired. Yet Rita remained cautious. She didn't revel in their downfall. It was justice, not entertainment. Her twins were her priority, and she shielded them from the chaos. Florence, desperate and abandoned, tried one last time to confront Rita privately. But Rita looked her in the eye and said, "You once called yourself my friend. You destroyed my family. But remember this, betrayal never wins in the end." With that, Florence was escorted out, her reign of deceit finally over. Florence's world collapsed. Bankrupt, disgraced, and shunned, she disappeared from society, her name now synonymous with scandal. David, too, lost everything. Former allies mocked him, calling him weak for letting a woman control him. He spiraled into isolation, drinking heavily, haunted by what he had lost, not just his empire, but Rita. Rita, meanwhile, flourished. With Harry's guidance, she reclaimed parts of her family's estate and began building a new company under her own name. Investors flocked to her, drawn by her strength and her story. She had transformed from a victim into a leader respected worldwide. Yet deep inside, she wrestled with a question. Should she allow David to know his children? Her twins asked about their father. Rita hesitated, torn between protecting them from pain and allowing them to know the man who had betrayed her. It was a decision that weighed heavier than revenge ever had. David sought her out, broken and desperate. He begged to see the twins, his eyes hollow but sincere. Rita was torn. She remembered his cruelty, the night he drove her into the rain, yet she also saw the twins longing for answers. After many sleepless nights, she relented on her terms. David could see them, but only under strict supervision. "They deserve to know their father," she said coldly, "but they don't deserve your poison." Meanwhile, Harry confessed his feelings. He told Rita he admired not just her beauty, but her resilience, her brilliance, her strength. "I don't want to replace anyone," he said softly. "I want to walk beside you." For the first time since David's betrayal, Rita felt her heart stir with genuine hope. She wasn't ready to decide, but she knew one thing. She deserved love built on respect, not lies. As she held her twins that night, Rita whispered to them, "No matter what, I will always choose what's best for you." It wasn't just a mother's promise. It was her life's mission. Years of pain had brought Rita here, to the steps of her reclaimed family estate. Her twins running through the halls once again filled with laughter. She had rebuilt her legacy, not as a shadow of her father's empire, but as the architect of her own. Society now knew her name not as the fallen heiress, but as the woman who had risen from betrayal stronger than ever. David remained a broken man on the periphery of her life, allowed to see his children, but never to wound her again. Florence vanished into obscurity, a lesson etched in Rita's memory, and Harry remained by her side, patient, steady, and unwavering. Rita hadn't yet accepted his love, but she knew that when she was ready, it would be a love built on trust, not deception. As she stood on the balcony, watching the sunset bathe her estate in gold, Rita smiled. Her twins laughed in the garden below, chasing butterflies, their voices filling the air with music. Betrayal had once destroyed her, but now, resilience had rebuilt her. This was not the end. It was a beginning, her new beginning. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.